high school would make it to the league. They're all gone now. They're 40, 45 years old.
It was cool the other night when they had Smiley and Stanek pitching together. Both racetracks.
I can. Just a second. Let me get this going. That'll just be there for a second.
We got our best pitcher. The best one left. It's not her playing. We have a decent amount of games they, you know, when you get to the elimination game, they threw everything they had. Yep. He's gone. Fred was on. The closers took 5 minutes.
He's got a minute. He's got a minute.
He's pretty much done. Oh, I say that, you know. You never know. Yeah, they'll get what they can, but I think if it goes to something, they've got a better offense, but that one has better. I think the day.
Do you have your volume on?
I'm gonna get rid of it. Hang on just a second. There you go. I was trying to do 5 things at once and it was failing miserably. Oh, thank you, Lorena. Totally forgot about those.
Told you. The thing is, he's not going anywhere. They're going to give him money.
Never doubt the man.
Nobody else in the team is 380. Nobody, the only 380 and they're not letting go. But I think next year is actually a better year. But I look trying to bring back. The first half. I mean, the Cardinals, they hit what, 17 in a row. That's just running. But the beginning of the year, we got this guy in there. Like 4 saves in a row. And at this point, they're going to set up gap and they're covered.
Yes.
We're going to get started with the City of Centerton Planning Commission for November 2nd, 2021 with a
Tony Davis here. Jerry Harris
here.
Amber Beal here. Joey Engel here. Ben Lewis here. John Sessoms
Here.
Devin Murphy here. Craig Langford here. Jeff Sackler here.
First thing on the agenda this evening is the approval of the minutes from our meeting on 10/19.
John, on motion to approve the minutes from 10/19/21.
Tony, I second.
Motion is second. Anyone vote? No admin approvals, no business. We have 3 items of new business this evening. 2 of those which will be a public hearing. The first one is for rezone 21-31 Sugar Missile Homes LLC. This is at 7728 Long Road. R3 single family, and we're asking for R3 duplex, 7.95 acres. And is the applicant here to give us some?
Yes, so we're looking to, what was your name? Sorry, I'm Jonathan Clement from Motion Chevrolet Ave. So we're looking to.
I don't think it works.
Well, it's on now.
Is it? Woo!
Alright, I'll start. I'm Jonathan Clement from Motion Chevrolet Ave. We're looking to rezone, I believe it's 7.95 acres from single family, R3 single family to R3 duplex. And this is pretty sure everything has been rezoned, and then now we're looking to just change a few lots. I'll be happy people to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm trying to get it where Donna can drive, but I'm not having any luck. Not letting me. Okay. This rezone is located here at the very end of South Tycoon Road and Vaughn Road. They did rezone the large majority of the property to R3 single family back in, I guess if I look at my notes I could figure it out, back in April of 2021. The larger parcel is 80 acres. They are looking to do the medium-high density single family, two family duplex in just this small area. They do have a plan for this development, and they are wanting to do just this area here in kind of the pinkish, reddish color. These would be duplex, so that is why they are asking for this to be rezoned to the duplex. The surrounding zoning, as you saw, is the single family R3, and there's still plenty of agriculture in the area. And just to the east is Bentonville, and of course this is an area where there's also Highfill and Bentonville to their west, south, and west. This is located on Vaughn Road, so that is scheduled on the master street plan for a minor arterial, 90 feet of right-of-way. And Tycoon will also continue on to the east, and that will be a major collector of 80 feet of right-of-way, and then Tycoon will extend, according to the master street plan, south down here to Vaughn Road, and that would be a major arterial with 100 feet of right-of-way. Of course, anything with right-of-way and things like that will be looked at, when they come in with their subdivision plans. And there is water and sewer out in this location. So there's kind of a quick overview for you guys. And the requested zoning may be considered compatible with surrounding uses that are slated to be in the area. Currently it's pasture land and maybe some large lot homes out in this area. And of course on the land use plan, this area is slated for industrial, but a vast majority of it has gone to R3 single family. And Bentonville, this piece here to the east, is they have it on their land use plan as agriculture also. It's a kind of, when they did their land use plan, anything that's kind of far out that they didn't think would be developed real soon, which we're all realizing that that's not happening, as agriculture out there. So that's kind of a quick nutshell on that one. And of course, this is close to the airport, which is just down here to the south. And we've had those discussions previously. And this is outside of the Bentonville airport area. This piece right here.
So it doesn't fall in the overlay.
It falls in the overlay, but it falls outside of the direct path for the flight path. And that was why you guys originally okayed this 80 acres as R3 single family. And this one here, you denied, and then it was appealed to City Council, and they approved it to change to the R3 single family also. Go back to that map. Oops, that's this map I need to fix. I already fixed one earlier today. But this is also R3 single family. Where's my map? There we go. R3 single family. I realized I needed to update my map, that it didn't get done. So, but this is also R3 single family, along with everything to the east and south, and this one further to the west.
Any additional questions before we open up to the public? Then at this time, I'd like to make a motion to open the public hearing.
This is Greg. I'll make a motion to open the public hearing for rezone 21-31.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Is anyone opposed? All right, we are now open to the public. If anyone wishes to speak in regards to the rezone 2131 for the Schubert Mitchell homes, again, it's approximately 8 acres. They're asking for R3 single family to R3 duplex. Whether you have a question, a comment, or anything like that, we would ask that you come to the podium, name and address, and then address the
My name is Alex English, and I represent the Northwest Arkansas National Airport. So essentially, we did oppose this rezoning when it was rezoned originally, I think it was in April, due to it being in the flight path that we are dealing with today. This is a concern for a number of reasons, as I'm sure many of you guys have already heard and we've discussed with you a few times as far as noise and safety concerns. Why we're here today to oppose this rezoning, obviously it's already residential, it's moving to the duplex, is just because it could possibly affect more people because of the possibility of a higher density with the duplex option. So we want to go on record that we are opposing this as well. We would also once again recommend, if it is rezoned to this duplex option, the abrogation easements we've discussed before, the plat notification, and then sound attenuation as well. It is an incompatible use with the airport or residential, and it could pose a problem legally in the future for the airport as well as the city.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in regards to the rezone? And we'll do a third and final call for anyone who wishes to speak on the rezone 2131 for Schubert Mitchell homes. Again, requesting R3 from R3 single family to R3 duplex.
This is Joey. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for rezone 2131.
Second. Motion and a second. Is anyone opposed? All right, public hearing is now closed. And for discussion.
Jeff, did we ever put that on the agenda to discuss about the overlay being added to our zoning as well as Bentonville?
Not yet, but the Abington is later with the wording and stuff is for later discussion, but
okay.
No additional work on overlay or anything like that. I think it's on the agenda maybe after.
I thought it was coming up, but I wasn't.
Or something.
So remind me, originally when this came through, there was some discussion. What did we end up with? Do you remember?
You originally,
Didn't they get appealed?
for the piece to the west, which is the 20 acres, this first came to you guys as the full 120-ish acres.
The one that was in the zone.
Yeah.
Yes, and then the one that was in the zone, they went ahead and removed from that zoning, that rezoning request, and you rezoned this piece to the R3 single family. And then the second piece, the 20-acre piece to the west, that is the one that they appealed to city council and city council overturned y'all's denial, so it is also R3 single family,
So
which is
that's
this
all
piece
one
here.
track, it didn't get split in 20.
Correct.
And there were no stipulations on the sound attenuation. I don't know that you can even put that on.
There was discussion.
And with the rezone, we could not.
And we said that would have to come with the development. They come with that.
Why those duplex in the middle of the subdivision? That's my first question.
Yeah, and what changed from the
Yeah.
from the original request?
I have our right here, not discuss further.
Pretty much we just got guidance from leadership on having a different product mix to bring more a different product to the table as well to offer to the city. So that's really why we wanted to add something to it.
Because there is a large development that's not too far away, that's going to be all.
Yes. Further north and east. But not terribly far away.
All right, let's go and go through the other point for any other questions or comments before we go to the platform. The first one is the rezoning consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan, including the adopted land use plan, if not, why? Thoughts?
I think the original rezone wasn't compatible with the land use plan.
Correct. But specific to this one, I mean, everything around it is basically single
Or still,
family.
yeah, or industrial actually, yeah,
On
on the west.
On the master.
Yeah.
Any other comments about that?
We just buy letters, that.
Correct.
Correct, but I don't know that.
Say no to that.
Because the master does the wrong. Is the proposed rezoning compatible with the surrounding area and zones? This is where I struggle with it, yes. Again, we have single family, that was defined, and then putting duplex, I can understand it maybe a different product. But you're gonna try to put flex in an area where people are gonna be coming in and out on the road, so for me, it's a no in regards to that, but I would certainly maintain the commissioner's discussion on this one.
Be a yes for me just because it's still residential.
When I look at the question, it also mentions an area, we have concerns with the, obviously, the far back of the road. We agree with the density increased.
We can't look at the proposed plans, all right, just the land use. Because the density may increase, but rooftops look like it. So the amount, you know what I mean, like the amount of, I guess, danger area would change. Quite as many people. But those plans are just draft, right? Because they can do whatever they want after that. We're just looking at that.
But it would be, it would be duplex in this.
I would say no, it doesn't. That's not the area.
Correct.
I'm yes. Just area-wise, there's especially in the Arthur area, not very far away. It's already high density. It's not a lot.
Gary?
Because it's in the center of a single family, I would have something.
Would all the permitted uses in the new zone be compatible with this location and surrounding areas? I mean, from a permitted use, I think the answer is yes, because they're designating duplex. Does anybody disagree? Which I think is the nice thing about having a duplex.
Still is.
It is. Does anybody disagree with that? Would the rezoning provide benefit from a landowner that would not be considered for other similar properties in this area? And I don't think it provides, in this case, consider it for each one of the areas because it's in the process. Does anybody disagree with that? And if the public is opposed, why are the objections based upon factual information relating directly to this request or opinion based as any factual information presented provides to this rezoning situation? And of course, very similar to before, Alex brought up the fact that, judges of noise, of course, the and of course, just put up in the future, it's like, that perspective. So, definitely some factual information that was presented there in regards to the situation. Still going to be residential. Any additional comments or questions? The request to rezone?
Mr. John Miller, I just want to make a couple comments. When we approached the commission about the original rezone, we wanted to go with a straight north rezone. Because we knew we were looking at some duplexes. Didn't know exactly where they were going to be, but if I remember right, there wasn't a north duplex zone. I think the questions is on the north would be with the duplex notation, however that works. So that was always the plan to try to get some duplexes on this. The second comment, there was some discussion.
Sure.
And I know we talked about planning staff.
I don't recall that. No, I'm usually
I don't remember, but that was a very long one.
I don't recall there being because at the time it was either single family or multi-family. There was no delineation.
Right, he was talking about
but, yeah, I don't recall there being a plan for anything other than single family. I'd have to go back and look at the notes, but
And I do have a question. At that time, we were still trying to designate, when we did those zones, if it was duplex, single family, multi-family. And I would imagine it was single family.
Right, no, we did. We went straight single family. Then we were to come back, planning to come back once we decided we wanted to do this. The second, I guess, comment, there was discussion, I couldn't hear it all about this adding density and a number of density and traffic. So we're talking about 26 duplex lots. Duplex lots 80 feet wide versus 60 foot single family. So we're adding 50% on for about 15, 16 dwelling units is what's being added to this. And then there, I think Jeff said something at the end about there being something factual about the airport. Any comments?
Black Knight.
But it's in the Black Knight.
Mm-hmm.
Which that is factual.
And when I'm in the
And there is noise if you're out there.
Right, and I was just gonna ask if there was anybody that had the, I know the FAA did a study on the noise, the decibel level, at this location relative to the runway exit, determined it to be in a safe level, compatible with single family.
But understand that it only takes one person that potentially moves in there that complains or decides they want to potentially do litigation against the city and the airport that potentially causes us issues, which is the reason that we've had many discussions with Brian, and it's on the agenda this evening, because it just takes one person to be disturbed by noise for any reason as a jet flies over or takes off. And that's been all the discussion each and every time for each parcel of the time.
I think some of the discussion was, I know it's been a year, but XNA moving from regional to national, you could expect even larger aircraft, even more traffic. And then what does that do to limit even, further potential growth? I don't know. But you can see now, the larger aircraft coming in, now that we've gone to national.
My question is, when we handle this during the development phase, when you put the note on it?
When he was saying 26 lots or 26 units, I'm sorry.
I think we're looking
we wouldn't
at
even look
26
at that,
duplex
right?
lots.
Yeah.
Which if you look at the 26 duplex lots versus the single family lots, they would add about 16 living units to the whole development.
Yeah.
And you were saying that this was in the original discussion?
Well, I know we had these discussions with staff before we came to the commission. I don't remember if we talked about it specifically with the commission.
And staff,
I don't remember. I just wondered if it was on our minutes or something.
Yeah. I'd have to look at the minutes. I don't recall it either way.
I don't doubt that it was a staff.
Yeah, I mean, if it was the original discussion, then I mean, that's kind of different, but
I believe it was discussed with staff, and they were told, that if you do decide to do a portion of it duplexes, you would have to come in for a rezone to do R3 duplex. But the original plan that they presented to you, because again, they weren't positive that was going to be something they were going to do. It was just the all R3 single family.
We weren't positive where they were going to be located.
Correct.
Correct. And if it wasn't discussed on the commission,
that
apologize.
I don't think we're saying it wasn't, I just don't know that anything was.
I lived it and relived it.
You wrote it.
We didn't
wrote
discuss it.
We didn't?
No.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, John.
Okay, Tom.
I mean, in my mind, in the grand scheme of things, it's still residential, like Amber said, but, I mean, we don't have a code for the flight paths at this point in time. So it is kind of an odd deal, odd shape, odd location, just for those duplexes.
Is there something special in that space that caused y'all to pick that location versus maybe away?
Some art thinking, we wanted to use it as a buffer, so that way, the noise of the road won't affect the neighbors, in the neighborhood, so we just wanted to use it as a transition.
Any other further discussion? If not, then I would entertain a motion for rezone 2131 Schubert Mitchell Homes LLC. Again, it's 7728 Long Road, R3 single family, requesting to go to R3 duplex, 7.95 acres.
I'll make a motion to approve rezoning Z21-31 Shooting Mitchell Homes from R3 single family to R3 duplex.
Second. Oh, sorry, yeah. I wasn't gonna do it.
This is Craig, I'll second.
Now we have a motion and a second. Todd, if you'll do a roll call.
Tony Davis.
Yes.
Jerry Harris.
Yes.
Amber Beal.
Yes.
Joey Engel.
Yes.
Ben Lewis.
Yes.
John Sessoms.
Yes.
Devin Murphy.
Yes.
Craig Langford. And Jeff Sutton.
I'll be the single no. Thank you, guys. Good luck. All right, next on the agenda this evening is a rezone 21-33, the Jessica Buchanan Living Trust, southwest southwest corner of LC Hickman, North Tycoon Road, A1 to R3 single family, just over 6 acres. Harvey, tonight,
Pretty good area.
give us an overview.
Yes, sir. Chase Allison with Morrison Shipley half. We're seeking this rezone. It is just north of the R3 single family that was rezoned here a few months ago. It's just an additional strip, about a little over 6 acres to facilitate, and the concept that we've done is just gives us a better concept. It's just the same. R3 single family to the south.
Yes. Love it, parroting projects. As Chase stated, this is a little additional piece to this section that was already rezoned to R3 single family, and the C2 here that was requested, so that way we would still retain some commercial along this corridor. Of course, the land use plan shows commercial all the way through, but you guys did determine that if we could preserve at least this future intersection, that would be acceptable. It is 6.05 acres. It was A1. Now they were requesting the R3 single family. They do have a track split also, and that track split will create this parcel, including this strip here. And I think once the track split was worked out and they've kind of made some plans, they went, uh-oh, we need a little bit more R3 to meet what we planned on. They are looking to do a single family home subdivision and preserve this piece here for future commercial. And it is medium high density. Like I said, this intersection over here at Bush Road and North Tycoon and south of there over on Edgewood has all gone to R3 single family, and there are currently all of these subdivisions through here have been approved by you guys, with 2 of them currently under construction. There is, let me scroll to another map over here. On the master street plan, there will be a proposed collector on the west side of the property, and to the southeast will be a minor arterial that of course will be looked at when they provide subdivision plans for this area.
Edgewood's not coming across the road.
Edgewood does not come across, that is correct. Edgewood is going to remain just a local street and just extend between those two roads. It will not extend. And utilities, there is public water available on the east side of Tycoon. Public water is available along North Tycoon Road, and sewer should be available on the east side of Tycoon by the end of 2021, according to Centerton Utilities. The property appears to be outside a designated floodplain. There is possibly a potential wetland on the property. Let me zoom in so you guys can see that a little bit better. Spavinaw Creek. So when they do a subdivision, there will need to be a wetlands designation just to make sure that you're not going to disturb anything there, especially because there's like an emergent wetland here in this corner. But for this piece of property, there's just this little piece of Spavinaw Creek here. And the surrounding zoning is R3 to the south and single family, and also agriculture to the north and the west. And the adopted land use plan, now let me zoom out, does show this area as medium high density residential, so it would be compatible with the existing land use plan. Well, for the land use plan, except for this little piece that is commercial right here, but we did have that discussion with the larger rezone previously. So planning does see that it is compatible with both the current zoning and also the land use plan.
Any questions for staff? At this time, we'll go ahead and open it up to the public. I'll entertain a motion to
Mr. Jerry, I make a motion.
John, I'll second.
motion, seconds, anyone opposed? All right, does anyone wish to speak or have any questions in regards to the rezone 2133? Again, it's at the southwest corner of LC Hickman and North Acton on A1 Second call for anyone who wishes to speak. And third and final call.
This is John. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for rezoning for 2133.
Jerry, I'll second.
A motion and a second. Is anyone opposed? Let's go through our questions again. First one is the rezoning consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan, including the adopted land use plan. If not, why? And I think this one is consistent. Anybody disagree? Is the proposed rezoning is the proposed rezoning compatible with the surrounding area and zones? I do believe that it is. Anybody disagree? Would all the permitted uses in the new zone be compatible in this location and surrounding areas? I believe the answer to this one is yes as well. Would the rezoning provide a benefit to one landowner but not be considered for others similar properties in this area? And I do not believe that it provides one benefit to one landowner. And there was no public opposition or comments.
This is Joey. I'll make a motion to approve rezoning 2133. Jesse Bennett Family Trust.
Anything else to add, Joe?
No, I'm good. I like it. Thank you.
I mean, I'm not.
Todd, if you'll do a roll call for me, please.
Tony Davis.
Yes.
Jerry Harris.
Yes.
Amber Beal.
Yes.
Joey Engel.
Yes.
Ben Lewis.
Yes.
John Sessoms.
Yes.
Devin Murphy.
Yes.
Greg Langford. And Jeff Seifert.
Yes as well. Thanks, Chief. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda this evening is subdivision renewal. -04, Prairie Brook completion bond discussion. The owner is Sugar Mitchell, and looks like detention pond, Tycoon, and Bush Road repairs. I think we'll start with staff first.
Okay, this subdivision is here at the corner of Tycoon and Bush Road. It is going to be 6 phases. By all means, correct me if I got that wrong. It's 5 or 6, 5. Thank you. And they are wanting to final the first phase of this subdivision. Now, with the first phase, it was agreed upon that all of Bush Road improvements and all of the Tycoon Road improvements be completed with phase 1, in addition to the detention pond with phase 1. We've learned that some of the issue is the way the phasing is broken up, that the phase line goes right along, excuse me, right along the edge of the pond. So all of the sewer and water and electric, which is odd that Carroll Electric decided to locate their lines over here and not along the road, but that's they're their own separate animal. So all of this work is still being done along this pond bank while the rest of the phases are going on. So they have requested to bond several items. This list is for items within the subdivision confines, I guess you could say it that way. The hydro seed and topsoil, detention basin final grading, detention basin sod, riprap, sidewalks along the pond, ADA ramps, truncated domes. Those would be at the area of the pond, not throughout the subdivision. Stop signs, street signs, and street lights. I said those are within the subdivision. Then, whoops. Also, these would be the off-site subdivision improvements that they would like to bond. Gutter crossing, we'll get into that more so when you see an email from John, and I'd like John to discuss his findings also. Road milling and overlaying, this would be on Tycoon, and if you've been out there, it's, at least when I was out there last week, I haven't been out there this week to see what's been done. There's still some issues out there. And also for Bush Road, to remove and replace storm crossing, mill, and overlay also. And also for the record drawings, we have received the record drawings and we are reviewing those, and the bonding of the record drawings, provided they're turned in and they're not an utter disaster. $5,000 is typically what planning has asked for those record drawings to make sure that we get them back. John did go out to the site. I guess, John, do you want to discuss what you have in the email you sent me, since you're the city engineer and the man in the know?
Just so I understand, this is just for discussion.
Correct.
Right?
It is just for discussion, no action.
As Diane said, it was the commission, staff, everybody's understanding that phase one, the Bush Road improvements, Tycoon Road improvements, and the detention pond will be completed. We are where we are now, and the developer is wanting the city to consider bonding portion of the detention pond improvements and some of the Tycoon and Bush Road improvements. I think it was staff's position, that's something we need to get the commission about, get their thoughts if that's even an option. As far as the detention basin goes, the detention basin was generally completed about 6 weeks ago. It was completed, it was sodded. They as-built it, they modeled the as-built data. I haven't looked at it, but they told me that it's sized and built appropriately. And as Diane said, there are utilities associated with future phases that go down the east bank. So they've been installing those, including electrical conduits, and they've kind of torn up that east bank. So, but what they want to do is to let the first phase final plat move forward and bond any improvements required to the detention basin, so they can finish those utilities and finish that up with, I would assume, phase two. I'm not sure. Phase two. And I guess that, in my opinion, they will leave it as a sedimentation basin. That's fine. It's generally stable. There's some areas on the east side that need to be restabilized. And if it's an active sedimentation basin, I move it to the next phase. I don't see a problem with that as long as there's adequate volume and functions. But we thought that's something you guys ought to
Can I ask
think
you
about.
one question on that, John? When it's phased and they share a detention pond, do they reshoot the pond?
Yeah, and that's something we talked about. If it's an active sedimentation basin, it's by nature going to collect sediment. And if sediment gets to a certain point, as engineers will present and we'll discuss it, they'll clean the sediment out. And they'll continue to do that as the project moves forward. And then when the last phase is complete, they'll recertify the whole pond, revegetate the whole pond, and then it'll be complete that time. The question is, would staff, would the commission be willing to consider a bond for that detention basin improvements that are still remaining? And they would have to review the pond analysis. I don't know that I looked at them that carefully, but that's something we will. Yeah.
My concern is not the detention basin, because I think there's opportunities where they can be successful doing that, but the issues with the road and the ponding and stuff, that's a whole different animal right there.
Is that one
And
bond
so
required?
Rick's group, they've got enough on their plate to worry about a developer causing issues, and with today's prices and trying to get contractors out there to fix it, I would be uncomfortable approving the bond for the road issues. I'm okay for bonding, my personal opinion, I'm okay for bonding for the drainage and the sediment basins. That, I think that can be worked successfully, but I do have a concern asking them or accepting a bond for the problem with the road right now.
Okay. And I went out to the site, looked at Bush Road, Tycoon Road, and I sent staff my
Are these your pictures?
Yes, these are his pictures.
Yeah.
And
And there
were
were,
the vertical pipe next to the flared end.
I think what those are gonna be, is those are forms for concrete, for railing and stuff.
Oh,
Okay. So there were, you know, I think 4 items that I noted that I think they should go ahead and complete now for safety reasons. And then the other items, I mean, personally, I would be comfortable with a bond, as long as there was a trigger or a time frame or something to determine when that work would be completed, and I would assume.
On the road portion or on the?
On the road portion, yeah. But again, that's why we're here. is to
Probably have a
let you guys
different
tell them
opinion
what
about
they,
the
what you
things
think.
Certainly definitely.
No, I would echo Tony's point of view. I don't understand what would
Are there
be-
any more crossings
Yeah.
or anything that would potentially get into the road?
There's the south crossing on Tycoon, there's 2 crossings on Tycoon. Everyone's in.
And I think I don't want to speak for them necessarily, but I think the point is they're trying to get on a plat and look at weather and other things that are causing them issues.
But all of this was approved to be done on the first phase, right?
That's correct, yeah.
You're welcome.
Did you want to speak?
I would say
Actually,
that
Yeah.
probably needs to be addressed. For sure.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know if y'all see the other pictures. I mean, you're obviously gonna have to do some milling to get the drainage to work right. And then it's very challenging. This is a flat area over here. So it could turn into something a little bit more complex than saying, oh, we're gonna bond for it. And then for some reason it doesn't get fixed. I mean, that's just my opinion. I'm a road guy. I'd like to see roads fixed correctly before we accept the final plat.
And you can't really see it here in this photo. Let me see if I zoom in a little bit more, if y'all can see it a little bit better. This entrance has not been completed, which it does need to be completed, so that way you have a whole road.
Supposed to be a taper.
There's definitely supposed to be the road still here, but then possibly a taper in this area, but
So is that part of phase 1 or is that a different phase?
I believe that was with phase 1. Because that is part of the street improvement. I mean, not them having to build this whole road over here,
But just the entrance.
but this entrance here, so
To finish
it
the
would be
street.
finished street.
And then, so are you guys asking to bond that as well? Or is
I
that gonna
don't
be
believe so.
completed?
I think you guys are gonna go that way. Yeah, they're planning on doing that. We were holding off on that because of the issues on Tycoon, trying to fix the grades that Rick had pointed out, so, trying not to install things when nothing out, but I think they can probably do all at once.
Is there anything you'd like to add, Sorry?
Just that, I mean, it's not an issue of whether or not they'll install the streets, it's just the timing. We're trying to get final plat so they get the homes built. They fully are prepared to fix the streets per city code. They are installed, there's just a few issues with bonding, and like you said, it's very flat out there, so, it's easy to have some contractors that they fully anticipate fixing. That's why they want to bond it now, so they can go ahead and proceed with final plat.
I mean, that looks like it's probably a little more serious than just we'll bond it and fix it at some time, I think. I mean, people.
Yeah, I
out
think
there-
that's an
People
area
are
that
driving
they're gonna
through
fix
there
as well.
when you start building.
Right.
And I think I don't know, it's simply just my opinion, and I'm with Tony, I mean, we suffer enough with roads in the city, and I'm definitely not comfortable, I mean, I drove out there, and it's rough, for one thing, and we're adding a ton of traffic out there in this area, so it's simply my opinion is I wouldn't feel comfortable from a road perspective, that's me.
And just my opinion too, about the only thing I've heard that I'm comfortable with bonding is that pond due to the utility installation going through. I mean, I think it was pretty clear and cut and dry that all of this is supposed to be done with phase 1. I understand that you're ready to final plat, but these improvements are supposed to be completed as well. I will throw out, sometimes And this turns out to be more of a pain than anything, but sometimes I've seen it done where you hold the COs on the houses until all of the improvements are done. But I really feel like a lot of this stuff should be done before the final plat.
Can they do that still? I know they used to could. I don't know if there was a change that they could withhold CLOs now because once it's accepted, it's accepted. I just want to make sure that that's still eligible.
No.
I know it used to be.
It just happened.
Still, that's my question.
It just happened in another municipality.
Okay, I didn't know.
Typically, that can be done in other
It's just
municipalities,
a
but in Centerton, building safety says once the house, if they build a house, it's done, they approve it, they have to give a C of O. They can't hold it.
That's what I'm thinking, because if you got a contract, somebody on a contract on a house, because they got a road issue 3 blocks over,
Right.
who are we to tell that property owner?
No, I
I
think
mean, when we
it's
can make them fix it now,
I think it's a better deal just to get it fixed. For sure.
you prevent future problems, I think.
Just want to say for the record, we understand all those concerns. Those are really legit concerns. From Sugar Mitchell's standpoint, we're definitely working on getting this fixed as soon as possible. Really, the only reason why we want to present this to you guys, I know we have meetings today with the contractor on the road, and we're actually having another meeting tomorrow. And our goal is to fix this as soon as possible for sure. And we just want to present this to you guys to see if we can get final plat on phase 1, see if we can start construction. But definitely our goal is not to wait longer to phase 6. We actually brought Anderson Engineering into the table to help the other engineer that was working on this project because we were some issues. So we're definitely, proactively trying to, get this fixed. So I just want to say that for the record. Thank you.
Do you need her name? I know she did.
Oh, Molly with Anderson.
Thank you.
And then I don't know if it's now, but there's a couple variance requests that we're gonna approach on this final plot as well. Is that?
Yeah, you can go ahead and bring it up so that way you know if it's you're crazy or.
Okay, so there's a few corner lots, so there are some variances from the street side setback. There are 25-foot setbacks on that, and then he's needing an additional 11 feet for those corner lots. Which would be the encroachment of the setback and.
In the easement?
Yeah.
I'm gonna
be tough on that. We talk about corner lots.
What's the hardship?
In every subdivision, we talk about corner lots.
They're not buildable? Did they not look at that before it was laid out? I got you.
We talk about it every time a subdivision comes in here. Everybody talks about corner lots. We look at every corner lot and we ask the same question. You can go back and look for years and we've asked the same thing because we ran into this issue. If there's not a true hardship, it's going to be tough to get it passed through the commission. I'll just tell you that right now.
Just wanted to ask that question. So, okay.
You can't ship the lot lines because everything's built to the lots.
Well, like there's others have been redone though.
Yeah, they made them change the whole.
Yeah, and that's a good deal for anybody. 11 feet, that's substantial.
Can I see?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm John Goins with Land Development Group. I build the neighborhoods for Sugar Mitchell Homes. And I wanted to just state on record that we do have a plan for the road, and us and the contractor we hired to do the road are acknowledging the fact that road is very poor. And we hired a APAC they're the contractors and they're standing behind their work and they're gonna come back and fix it. Also, the major items with the construction entrance are being dealt with pending weather this week, so it'll be a completely different job site probably the next time you guys drive by after the dry days.
Okay. Thank you. Can you go back to the Liz's?
Of the bond.
Yes.
Is there a
Sure.
Well, we just need to give us some guidance.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask. I don't
We just
see
need to give
that
some
in the
guidance.
request.
So
Correct,
They're
They're just
clear
discussing.
guidance on what
Okay,
we-
okay.
It's just guidance and to go through you guys
Yes.
for yes or no.
Some feelers.
Yes. It's nothing up for a vote this evening. Just discussion.
That's Mr. Jeff. Good. Jeff Caulfield, I live on Dorsey Lee, and I just wanted to have a little input. It sounds like you kind of have a handle on what you're looking at, but there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out. I know it's not up for a vote tonight, but one of the things that was mentioned, and it keeps getting stated, is improvements. And what's happened to both of those roads are not improvements, they're detriments to city road that's paid by tax dollar, and was only overlaid because the state was so gracious to give the city of Centerton extra money they had in their coffers a couple years ago, and those roads were all fixed because the city didn't have the funds to fix those. So improvements are meant to be improvements, not, we kind of think we need to fix it, but we messed it up, but we want to bond it, and we really, really are good patrons, and we still want to go ahead and give you what you need, but we got to hurry up and sell lots. I'm not saying that they won't take care of it, but there's only a couple things that you can do as the people who take care of all the roads, all the utilities, everything that comes in for all the new citizens, and that's to make sure that everything inside that subdivision meets your current code. But anything that they do with that new subdivision that affects your existing improvements, be it the roads, utilities, you definitely have a burden to make sure that you don't let them slide. Someone made a good comment, you know, I've been doing this for a long time. I don't do it with this city, but I still deal with a lot of cities in the state of Arkansas, and it isn't always an easy fix. And I can tell you by somebody who drives that road every day, it still has a one-lane road sign that's set up, and it's been there since they started working on that road. You might want to look and see how many months that is. You have to pull over, you have to stop. Everybody runs into issues, everybody runs into problems. And sometimes you have to overcome that. Now, overcoming that may mean you have to swallow your pride, wait a few weeks, get your final plat after you say, I'm gonna fix it, just fix it and bring it in right. I'm pretty sure we're not short of brand new subdivisions coming in and people are building it. So that's my input, and I just hope that you take into consideration the existing roads that were there and the money that the city didn't have to spend on it to put in the position as well as required them to do it. It was gifted money from the state of Arkansas for the roads. Otherwise, that road wouldn't have the overlay that's sitting on it. It was finished about a year and a half ago.
Go back to that list.
Yes, Lori wanted me to show some photos of the pond. Now, real good, Laura and I were out in the lovely rain last week.
Well, that's the best time to take a picture.
For the photographer, it's not so nice. Or the driver's car.
We'll rinse it off.
All right, it's not gonna let me click through them.
Is that the inside of the pond?
Yes. All right, let me do it this way so I can click through them. And this is looking, I need better glasses. On the road inside, looking down into the pond. Over here is Tycoon. So there are still some pretty good issues with it, and one side, why will it not let me do what I want to do?
John, is this the overall pond for the whole subdivision? Or is this the overall pond for the, there's just one pond?
Yeah, this side when we had, of course it was a deluge of rain, and it is a very, very long pond. This area here was like a waterfall in that super obnoxious rain a couple weeks ago, and that still looks, again, as of last week, looked like that, where that side basically had failed. I will go back to your list now.
Again, we're just giving guidance here, no action this evening, so
functional state where it serves its purpose. But I also understand utility companies can come through there, rip up the side of it, your saw's going. That's more what I was talking about with the bond requirement. But also on the second phase, it's gonna get silted in the whole bird. So I'm comfortable with that.
Miles, good. Okay. Roads.
I'm not going. There seems to be a lot of safety concerns there that are not close to quick fixes.
Worst case, if they bonded, they don't do it, now we have to find somebody to get it.
Well, if the money's right.
And that money,
So, I mean,
the money,
what
that's
the
not
price
gonna
will
fix
be.
some of the
And we
issues.
can get the materials.
I mean, you're talking about a smaller, on the contractor, I mean, that would be considered a small job, so you're talking about, mobilization fees, $50,000 plus just to show up to do the work. For, $25,000 worth of work, because I can tell you, it's hard to get asphalt contractors right now. Especially on small, and this would be considered a small job, so.
So I think we're going towards no. That was the major thing, right? I mean, the signing and the other stuff.
Oh, there it is.
Everybody okay with the other stuff? The street, why does the street light show up here? That's kind of odd. I don't think we've ever seen anything on. Do y'all, is that Carroll or is it, Swepco?
It's Carroll.
Did you already buy the, you're just waiting on them? See where it says,
Very bottom one.
Street lights, street signs, street lights.
Now, I have a question on man, this is just for 311, or, address person, 911. I don't know if you can bond the stop signs and the street signs. If you accept the final plat, I think you'd have to put the signs up before you build a house, right? Because you got an address off the house.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can bond for that.
Yeah, what, is that just for phase one? You guys were wanting to bond the stop signs and, I don't understand how that would work. And the street signs?
I think when the engineer represents the site that those signs were installed, but as of right now, they should be, so we can take it off that list.
Because I think that's just part of having a subdivision. Have the stop
I think we
signs.
include that as on the list.
I'm gonna say based on the pictures we just saw, I don't know what it is currently today, but I would say the final grading line item for $2,500 for the pond is way low. There seems to be some work to be done with it.
I think the only one in those pictures that photographed was Cep Requirements, the serve on utilities, which I think has already been replaced. So it's just for removing silt throughout construction, is what that final grading is on.
John, is that something you review? If when all this comes together, if the bond is considered bondable, can that be something you can weigh in on?
Yeah.
As far as anything else?
Review this.
Yeah.
And I did just receive this new one late this afternoon.
Yeah, we're just trying to get a little ahead of
Does that give you the guidance that you guys need then? Okay. If there's no further discussion, we're going to move on to other business then.
Leaning tower of AT&T.
Hey there, no, we're here now, so.
I now have a leaning.
It ain't fun, man. I don't.
While we're here?
Yeah.
Really? I think Jim and
I was standing on both legs.
Hey, if it gets me better AT&T signal, it can.
I'm telling you. Maybe it's leaning towards my house and I'll actually be able to get a signal.
Yeah,
Because I get 0 in my house.
Oh, that
So
stinks.
I would be excited to get.
Just out there with a 10-foil pole.
I had them One toe up and.
I wasn't sure if there's one more section going on top of it, or if that's done.
I think it's done, it's just gotta put the rays on it.
Juliet,
they gotta put the tree.
In the tree, they gotta put the leaves on the palm tree, gotta paint it brown.
I think we're saguaro in that thing.
Yeah, really?
I think we're cactus.
I thought we did I thought we did palm, island palm.
Inflatable guy.
Juliet loves our palm.
You are?
You love our palm tree, don't you?
Yeah.
She hasn't seen it. She hasn't.
Where is it at?
Right over here.
It's
The cell tower that we approved recently.
They're just giving me a hard time.
The leaves are backward.
So, okay, so I assume that all of y'all got a copy of this document, which makes for good reading, I know.
It's very engaging.
It's very what?
Engaging.
Yeah.
They're just kind of.
Did you read it while you fell asleep last night?
Can't put it down. Yeah. So, I'm not gonna read through the whole thing unless you want me to. So I put together a PowerPoint to try to kind of hit the high points for you. I mean, I think discussing wireless facilities generally that are heavily regulated through the FCC. I think we talked about this a little bit last time. And there's a lot of things that are kind of predetermined in the way that you can process them, in the way that and in the way that you can deal with design elements and other. So, and I will say, I told Maureen and Diane this, I said if you encounter any wording in here that sounds kind of crazy, in terms,
Shot clock.
yeah. Well, shot clock's the least crazy word. Like make ready facilities, all that. That's not my language. That comes directly from some FCC orders. It's basically a reference to their language, and we'll make sure that all the definitions get in there for that align with the FCC orders. So.
I have a question before we get started
Yeah.
as well. I need to actually go through most of your comments. Do we need to designate areas? As far as like key areas where coverage is necessary or where we would want to see? Because I think I've seen some other areas where that's been done. I know it's regulated by FCC as well, but just are there key areas as part of the city that we would want to make sure if they were going to invest in, let's say 5G or something else, or would we just let them do it?
I mean, I guess you could. The thing is, if you couldn't, I don't think you could really consider that. When it comes down to it, you can't.
Put them there,
I would
They-
think it would
they
kind
put
of
'em in-
tie into their towers, right? So if you designated this area over
Not
here.
the sub small ones.
Okay, this
Those are
one.
gonna follow. Those are gonna follow populations and where you can find cheap land.
Yeah.
I
Well,
thought it
they don't need to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
They're small ones, 'cause
you
they
can
get
put
the-
those on the side on a light
They
bulb.
get the
Yeah.
right of ways for free. Yeah. So, I guess you could, I think, honestly, what I've seen in, like, the way the wireless industry, not part of the wireless industry, but just kind of dealing with how they work through the development process, you know, over the years, it's kind of changed. There used to be kind of more third parties that were not affiliated directly with the providers that would put up towers and things, and there still are lots of third parties involved, but they're almost always directly affiliated with, you know, with AT&T, like they exclusively do AT&T work or Verizon work or whatever. And because of that, you see less like speculative towers. I've seen less up here than we did even like 10 years ago. And, you know, most of it is the networks working directly to fill those holes, right, as they see them. And so I'm not sure it would really net you anything.
Okay. Is there any other general questions before we dive in? So I just want to kind of go over to the ones that we're going to talk about today. You have towers, also called macro cells, which is the traditional cell towers that you're used to. The antennas, which may be attached to the towers or sometimes to other structures, you know, water towers, tall buildings, what have you. And then you have small cell infrastructure, kind of in its own little section. So the macro cell versus the small cell. So the macro cells, usually they have a much larger coverage area, right? They're way up high, and they're meant to cover larger areas. And the small cells, you know, kind of like Wi-Fi in a building, they do not cover, you know, as large of an area. And a lot of times they're put in areas where you have higher density of people. You know, like downtowns is where you see them a lot, but honestly, you know, I live in Springdale, and they have them in residential neighborhoods there now. So they're kind of starting to go everywhere. And they'll also put them in, like a lot of these larger towers, even if you have the coverage, so if you have like the coverage maps like you were talking about, Jeff, where you can see there's holes in the coverage. So you may have issues with your cell coverage, I guess your cell usage, or not being able to use it well, even if you have coverage from the tower, because you also have capacity issues with the quantity of users. And I think that's another reason the small cells have come into play, just because, you know, the quantity of users of wireless devices, not just people using phones, but, you know, just in our society now, it's everywhere. Ambulances use them, people have things in their cars, they're on all the time, and there's just a lot more users on the network. So they kind of serve different purposes. Okay, so visual examples of the traditional wireless facilities like macro cells. So you have different types of towers. You have the guide towers, which of course have guide wires, monopole, which is a singular pole, and then self-support, which is what I'll call a lattice tower.
That's our palm.
That's our palm.
That's our palm.
Right.
Yeah, that's
So,
that's kind of.
And I want to talk about these a little bit, because what we're proposing to do is limit the types of traditional towers within your city limits to a monopole with interior antennas. So actually not any of those up there. But so what happens when you do that is just structurally, the height of the tower comes down. So, you know, guide towers can be very tall. I mean, honestly, I don't know if I've seen any in Northwest Arkansas over 350 feet. I mean, that's pretty big, right? It's a very large structure. And then the self-support towers, they're not as tall as the guide towers, but you can get, you know, whatever, 250, things like that. So you see those a lot in areas where, you know, maybe you don't have as many users, probably like come out in the fringes of the county, right, where you need coverage. It goes a long way. So generally speaking, you know, there's always exceptions to everything, but I think, to me, the visual impact that you have from those very large structures, and they're just not very nice looking structures, honestly, it's a big aesthetic impact to a community. And generally speaking, I think, you know, cities, to me, it's an acceptable trade-off that you might have to have, you know, 300-foot monopoles in different parts of the city to cover something that a giant monstrosity lattice tower in the middle of your, you know, town would cover. So this is something that a lot of different communities in Northwest Arkansas have gone to, is just having these monopoles in the city that have the interior antennas like these. So those, I think that, you know, where that one with the lights on, I think that might be Greenland. But yeah, like, so, you know, sometimes they use them in ball fields, hang lights on them. Some people actually use them as flagpoles, but most commonly you see them as the one on the far right, which is just a pole, right?
Please don't make it
Put
look
those
like a
at
tree.
the batting cages.
Okay, I think we covered that.
Okay.
Then we have we call it non-typical designs, right, where you have people putting in, you know, there's the infamous tree in Fayetteville.
It's so awful.
You can put a Walmart logo on that. You could, yeah, you could, you can rent that.
I think it's like a sign, I think it's like at a sports park, you know, and so they'll have these different types of RF screening that, you know, it's screened visually, but it's penetrable by the radio frequency waves that need to get through it to propagate a signal.
We could use the castle wall.
Todd, we could have that right on the corner.
We could have.
There's
right
your
on the
palm
corner.
tree, John.
It was there the whole time.
Unobstructed donkey.
Here we go.
More non-typical
Put that on
design. I think we talked
Put
about
that on-
that. Yeah, so you got your palm tree and flowers. Yeah,
The cactus ones are actually pretty decent looking.
Yeah.
Not in Arkansas.
Well, obviously not in Arkansas. Nor the
It could be a
palm
prickly
tree.
pear. You can find those in Arkansas.
Okay, this is just saying what I said earlier, that, you know, you have, you just have a lot more users on the network than you used to. And so we just kind of need to address what you have
So,
regulation-wise.
just a general question, the 5G ones that we see going up around town, those are just for bandwidth? Or is that also for coverage?
Their coverage and bandwidth, but most of the places you see them don't suffer from a coverage problem.
Yeah, it's
It's just, yeah,
Lower
it's just a,
users.
yeah, it's a quantity of users. Yep, so that is most of it. You can go to the next one. Okay, so I'm gonna go through just real quick, kind of what these legal developments are that we've had like in the last decade. So you have the shot clock, which is a time limitations on review, comment, and approval. And that was actually revised again in 2020, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly. So their orders that they put out are, you know, they're supposed to be clarifications to their previous documents, you know, so that everybody is clear on what's happening now, you know. But, you know, it's a 63-page clarification that basically covers like 5 items, and, you know, whatever. 12 hours of reading now, I'm still not sure what it clarifies. But anyway, we're gonna work on that. I am gonna get some clarification.
A clarification of the clarification.
Yeah, and make sure that we get, if there's 2 sets of shot clocks, one that applies to all facilities, so your macro cells as well. And then there's a second set of shot clock regulations that apply to small cells. And I think that there may have been some changes to the ones from the macro cell when they did the last round of small cell stuff. Anyway, we're in the midst of figuring that out, and we'll have it figured out before it goes to public hearing. So then different like improvements for both towers. So anytime you're adding things to a tower, then they regulate what reviews you can actually do when things are added. And then kind of pushing on some of the zoning regulations as well. And so the 2018 FCC order was the big one dealing with small cells. And then in 2019, the Arkansas State Legislature decided to throw their hat in the ring too and further regulate what the 2018 FCC order did, which honestly to me just really made it more confusing. But anyway, so there's pieces of both of those things folded into this. And then like so we have this new order that we're still trying to make sure that this will be compliant. So right now, for the towers, all your towers are processed via conditional use permit. You don't have any kind of set of tower regulations that sort of are next step in the process, right? You either you have to handle the whole thing under conditional use permit, or that's basically it, right? So that's your only process. So with this, what we're gonna do, we are gonna keep some of them as a conditional use permit, but there's gonna be just a set of tower regulations that apply to any new tower, whether it's a tower you need a conditional use permit for or not. And so it's gonna be a set of standards, and that will address all that. And then small cell, you don't have any regulations in place, which is honestly not unusual. Nobody had any until 2019. So it's not like you're too far behind right now. So, and kind of the basic gist of it is in that 2018 order, the federal law now states that they must be permitted within right of way. Like, you cannot not permit them, and you cannot require conditional use or anything. And so basically you're looking at allowing them to deploy, and you have a small number of things that you can do that looks at how those deployments happen.
That's any right of way?
That's
City,
correct.
state? That's cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting, yeah.
I wonder who lobbied that one.
Well,
That's.
if
They left
you
that wide
read
open.
those orders,
Yeah.
you can see there's several wireless lobby groups. I'm pretty sure. Okay. So the goals for this new ordinance, we want to have good aesthetics to the extent possible, safety, create low impact to surrounding property owners, ensure environmental compliance, and make sure that we don't have kind of over proliferation of towers. But like I said, that's becoming less and less of a problem. Okay, so we're creating a new permitting process. So this is just about new towers. So all new towers have to go through the process, requires basic review. The way it's written right now requires all new towers to be a monopole tower with no external antenna. And I'll just say that the cities that have implemented this, I do feel like it's effective. You know, if you choose to adopt it this way, if this is the way you want to go, you know, we just had one in the city a couple months ago where, you know, Verizon submitted a self-support tower, right? That was their first submittal. And, you know, we were reviewing it for the city, and it's like, oh, well, sorry, you know, the city went through this deliberation, they passed a new ordinance, they spent time talking about what the aesthetics they want are, and they said, all we're doing is monopole. You know, I mean, you can always ask for a variance. I said, you know, this ordinance has been in place less than a year. I don't know why, you know, tell me what your hardship is. And, you know, they just took it and then they just came back and resubmitted it with a model, and that was that. So it just eliminates that whole, to me, one of the most contentious parts of the conversation that you have to have with neighbors, because those other styles, I do think, have a big aesthetic impact. So I found that to be a good move for most cities. I'm not saying that you have to do it. Let's see. So it also effectively limits that height to around 200 or less. I mean, honestly, it's usually around 150. And you don't have to light the towers on top at night. I'll give a caveat to this, since we'll just have a big discussion about the airport. There are areas, if you're in the flight path of the airport, that, you know, these other heights do have to be lit. So it's not always true, but for the most part, unless you are in close proximity to the airport or a direct flight path like that, then, you know, if it's below 200 feet, then the FAA does not require you to light it. And that is something too that sometimes neighbors get very upset about, is having lights. Should be or shouldn't be, but anyway. So that, again, it just kind of takes that out of the conversation, which I think is good. So what we're saying right now, the way it's drafted, is that new communication towers shall be allowed as conditional use permit only within all zoning districts, with the exception of A1 agricultural. and they can only be allowed by right. And when we say by right, they still have to go through that regular tower review process, just not the conditional use permit process yet. If they meet these two conditions. So one, it meets the current A1 specifications, so in regard to minimum size and use, right? So this wouldn't apply if you had, you know, some little remnant parcel that, like, you know, has been zoned ag for whatever, 50 years, but really it's only like 3/4 of an acre, you know, just kind of out by itself. So I just want to make sure that you understand that. And that the tower is set back at least 100 feet or set back the distance of the tower height. So it's measured from the base of the tower to the tip of the tower, whichever is greater from any existing residences or residentially zoned property. So that, and we did that, discussed, because, you know, you do have I would say that there's a pretty substantial amount of property still zoned agricultural in Centerton. And so I think what you wouldn't want, if you wouldn't want it to like just go right on the property line, you know, on a piece of property that's agricultural, but, you know, 10 feet over is a residential subdivision. So that was kind of created to give that space. And if you feel like it should be a greater distance or whatever, then we can talk about that. So does that all make sense? Okay. So other regulations that we put in there, noise requirements for generators, basically just requires that they all have generators now, all of them. And when they have those, that they have to have like a residential muffler on it. So it's not gonna be any louder than anybody else's generator, you know, in a residential setting if the power goes off. Compliance with federal regulations, lighting and signage restrictions, a provision for opaque fencing around the base of the site. So to me, besides aesthetics of the tower itself, I think that the sites where you have all the equipment on the ground level, those are another thing that can be an aesthetic problem if they're close to, you know, residences or honestly even some commercial development. So just having that fence and then putting some landscaping and vegetative screening requirements around that. So to me, it's like any other commercial development, you know, you want it to look tidy and look nice, and here's some basic regulations to make it do that. And then we have some basic review elements, scale of site plan, foundation design that's informed by geotechnical information specific to the site. So making sure, you know, they're looking at the soils that are here at this site in Centerton when they're doing that foundation design, they're not getting something generic. And then a structural analysis as well. So, do you have any questions about any of that? So, CUP requirements for towers. So we have kind of a separate section in there that talks about just what the CUP requirements are. So they're going to go through your regular city CUP process, but basically they're going to have a layer of things that you wouldn't ask for and another type of CUP that basicly addresses, you know, why they're putting it here, how they're kind of addressing their goals, or laid out some goals in the draft ordinance. And then it also allows for you to request a sightline representation if needed, which basically says, you know, they would take a photograph, drop a picture of it so you could actually see what the aesthetic impact might be. Okay, and then the other thing that we're going to cover is, well, kind of this section of traditional towers is requirements for new and replacement antennas. So one thing, so basically we're saying if they're going to come in and swap out an existing older antenna with a new one, you're going to require them, and honestly, this mostly applies to the ones that have external antennas now, right? Then you're going to ask them, you're going to require them to say basically what they're doing is equal to or less than what's there, because those towers are, you know, structurally designed to handle a certain amount of loading. And a lot of it is not specifically like the weight of the antenna or whatever itself, but it's the way it's wired, and you know, they have to be able to carry ice loads for all the wires and all the things that hang off of it, and that seems to be kind of the tipping point. And I have reviewed applications for where they were adding things, and then it did cause it to go over the loading capacity. And then there are going to be some limitations on additional height that you allow. So say you get an existing cell tower, and somebody's like, well, I want to add an antenna, but when I add this specific antenna, it's actually going to increase the height of the tower by 15 feet, because we're going to put it right on the top, whatever. To be honest, I don't see a lot of these, but there is some specific FCC regulations that say, you know, that you can increase it, but there's only a certain, if they're increasing it by less than a certain percentage, then you cannot not approve it for that. So we're going to just have all that lined out in there. And then we have some provisions and regulation for the addition of antennas to other structures, like water towers or salt dams. Okay, small cells. So, yeah, I think probably most of you have seen them by now. I'll just go through some visual examples. So, you know, they're on poles. A lot of times they look like, you know, cylinder at the top, if they're done nicely, and it looks like a bunch of junk hanging off the pole if they're not. So there's a picture of one in Chicago where you have a lot of them put on a street light, and then the other one is actually in downtown Little Rock in their historic district. It's a little bit hard to see in that one, but it has, that's the cylinder on top, and then they put kind of like some historic district light post on there as well.
That's Sonny Williams.
That's another shot of that same style in Little Rock, and then this is one outside the historic district in Little Rock, so like 3 blocks over, still downtown. That one on the right is, and so you'll see that it's less concealment, right? Like the other one has all the pieces concealed, and this one has less concealment, or you can see the different pieces. And this one is actually in a park in downtown Fort Rock along near Junction Bridge. I just happened to be in Little Rock a couple weeks ago.
Oh.
Here's all the things that we want to avoid if possible. So we have to allow them in the right of way, but we would prefer that they not look like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So just these are some that, like Fayetteville has an ordinance, and I've got some plans for some different ones that, that they're having put in different districts. You can just click. And so some of these are, I think this is so this is one that's being put on a wooden utility pole. And so like all these FCC regulations, they say like not only do you have to let them happen in the right of way, like you have to let them attach to the things that are there. You cannot make them upgrade the type of pole that's there except in specific circumstances. So like in this case, I think Springdale they had a pole there before they're using it as a street light, as a wooden pole. And in this case, they put in a new wooden pole. I think, I don't know why exactly, maybe the other one just needed replaced, but you couldn't make them upgrade to a different type of pole. So. Yeah, that's just an existing SWPCO pole. It didn't change at all. And then this next one is in Springdale. So Springdale opted not to pass any regulations, and I will say, just as a resident, I see some flaws in that that I don't particularly love as a resident. And so basically what it results is, and this is near the Harps on Sunset. You're familiar with that. So it's interesting. You can't make them go underground if it's an area where you don't have underground utilities. So in this case, like Springdale had above ground utilities, But you know, a lot of times your above-ground utilities are all on different sides, on one side of the road, right? But in this case, because Springdale didn't have any regulation, they're allowed to come on the other side of the road and throw up a pole. And of course, they're gonna do that because their fiber is buried on that side of the road. So if they put it up on that side, then, you know, they don't have to bore into the road with their fiber to get to the other side. But to me, it's not as big a deal on Sunset because Sunset, well, I think we can just say Sunset's pretty visually cluttered. But to me, it is kind of a shame in areas, and I've seen this in residential areas in Springdale where you have, you know, you will have some poles on one side of the road, you don't on the other, and then, you know, all of a sudden you're adding poles to people's, you know, basically yards, right, the right of way, you know, for people who've never had above ground utilities in their yard. I just think that's kind of, I don't know, it's just needlessly aesthetic clutter. And I think, again, things that people are not expecting to happen, right? And so I think if we can avoid those kinds of things, then we should. Okay, so they have specific terms that the FCC's defined. It has, you know, basically has to do with the size of the equipment structure that's going in. So you can't prohibit them in the right of way. You have your different shot clocks that are just for them. And the shot clocks start with submission of the application, regardless of completion. And this is something that, you know, it's going to be something staff will have to deal with, and we'll make sure that we get everything in the application or whatever we need to do to make sure it's clear. But I always hated when I worked for a public plan, I just hated all the shot clocks that made me nervous. And, you know, I would sit down and have to reread the stupid orders every time to understand exactly when the shot clocks start and stop. But anyway, for small cells, they'll all be handled through an administrative process, and that's not going to be a problem for y'all, per se. Okay, we can hit the next one. So they also, the FCC limited the fees that you can, for all small wireless facilities. So we're going to make sure that we have fees that comply with that in this ordinance. And I guess I will say that what they set were what they call safe harbor amounts, which is hard. But, you know, basically my understanding is, you know, if you as a city set your fees to that amount, up to that amount, where they say is a safe harbor, then you're not going to run into any problems. And you can charge more than that, but basically there's a big burden on you as a city to basically lay out exactly why it costs more for you to process that than what the safe harbor fee is. And I don't know.
So the courts have just found that it's a reasonable amount.
Right, okay. So, there you go. So we're going to set it at the safe harbor amounts. Yeah, we can go from there. Okay. So, and then this, I think is just good for you to kind of understand is there are different safe harbor amounts. There's like the application fees, but then there's also ones that apply to the city. Maybe that's the next slide. Anyway, there's amounts that the city can charge. So like if they're going to use your utility poles, then you basically, like how you would usually charge franchise fees or something like that, they also have amounts that are laid out for that that the city can charge for basically use of their right of way or facilities. Or the
second one.
Yes, thank you. So there's kind of two steps, and again, so if you see those numbers, then that's not something that we're, you know, the city of Centerton sat down and said, oh yeah, this is what we should charge for, you know, application and use of our right of way. This is basically predetermined by this. Okay, so they do allow, like I said, some aesthetic requirements, including minimum spacing requirements. Although those have been contested and are kind of going backward, and that's part of this 2020 order as well. So that maybe that has changed. But they have to be reasonable. I think one of the key things is they can be no more burdensome than those applied to other types of infrastructure deployments. So, for instance, you know, if you let the cable companies do something a certain way on a certain type of poles, then you're going to have to let the small cells do it too. And that's just the way it goes. So that's a big piece of it. And then they have to be published in advance. So, to me, the aesthetic issues are kind of the antenna structure, the base cabinet, wires, like, the wires just like dangle everywhere, and then general proliferation, which goes into spacing. I will say that I don't think proliferation is a problem in Northwest Arkansas this time. I do see it kind of in other larger cities, but I haven't seen it here. And then leases and franchise fees. And then it is kind of interesting. So there's some weird pieces. So, like, you know, you don't have your own power company, right? As mentioned. So you're dealing with SWEPCO and care. Okay. Right. So there's some different things that apply to how they can mount things on their poles and things that are going to be just basically going to kind of be out of what you can't regulate all of that, but you can regulate some of it. So the height, and again, this is FCC stuff. So it's limited to 50-foot max, or sorry, there should be not more than 10% above the structure on which it's located. So there isn't language in here that affords historic districts and overlay districts some protection. And Lorraine and I talked about it. You know, I know you don't have a historic district right now. Do you have any overlay districts? No. Not yet, right. But we want to go ahead and cover that in your code, so that if it does happen, then you could apply specific regulations to that, because those are protections that are afforded through the FCC stuff and through the state law. So you saw kind of the difference in downtown Little Rock from their historic district to the non-historic district. Okay, so basically what we're doing is we're putting something in place to where, I don't know if I want to read all this to you, but we're looking at in areas where you do have a certain type of aesthetic pole that is happening, like for street lights or whatever, and again, then we're going to allow you to ask the small cell providers to match that, right? Even if it's not a historic district per se. And then the other thing is that if you have areas where everything is required to be undergrounded, electric, cable, all that, then you do have the ability to kind of treat them similarly. Now, you can't actually prohibit them from putting up, you know, a pole, but you can make sure that basically that it looks heightier than it would. So there's some pieces that you can control with that. And then also, like we were talking about in Springdale, if you have overhead utilities on one side of the street, you can ask them you can require them to go on that side of the street instead of just putting it, you know, wherever's most convenient for them. There are some spacing, specifically in residential. I will say that I feel like a lot of the deployments that I've seen in Northwest Arkansas, that they try to put them on the lot line if it's in a residential area, which I think I would appreciate as a lot owner, right? And so I think that's good. But you can have more say in the spacing if it's in a residential area, to try to limit the impact. on those residents, so we put that in there as well. And then basically asking them to screen those antennas and things to the, basically to the extent possible, and have them match the color of the existing poles and things, so where you not have just the loose wires, like have the wires, kind of secured to the pole, so you don't just have loops of wiring and things like that, to try to make it as tidy as possible. So that's the long and short of what we're doing with this ordinance. Do you have any questions or comments?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I've been in the communication business for many years.
Yes, sir.
And I know everybody wants coverage.
Yeah.
Everybody, I mean, you hear a lot of people complaining about my cell phone coverage.
Just me.
Let me just say, everything that's been proposed is going to reduce your coverage. I realize that antenna technology has really increased since the years that I've been in communications. I put up a lot of towers, a lot of antennas. Each antenna has a specific radiation pattern.
Wow.
Depending on the dB, the decibel output of the antenna. The reason they use height is because that gets more coverage.
Right.
You've got frequency. Frequency is a big factor because your cell phones are up in the high frequency range. So you're limiting your antenna, a high frequency antenna. Anything in front of it is going to block that signal. So when you put a monopole up and you hide the antenna inside something, whatever that structure is you're hiding it in, you're blocking signal. So here's what you're going to wind up with. You're wanting, like you said 50-foot high antennas. You're going to have to, especially a town like, well, Little Rock you're talking about, but even Springdale or some of the towns that's got some of the larger buildings, you're going to have antennas sticking up like hair on a cat, because 50 foot in a high frequency antenna, if the building's going to block the signal, you are going to run into all kinds of problems. The people, I know they want aesthetics, and that's fine, but they want coverage. And unless technology for antennas has really increased, you're going to be limiting. Height is so critical, frequency is critical, the radiation pattern, and that's what these companies do. They know what the radiation pattern is for every single cell tower. They know how the radiation pattern.
Yes.
And not every antenna has the same radiation pattern.
Right.
And so there's some that's got lobes and some that's got, and so they strategically put these towers up to where they can get better coverage area-wide. And so what we're doing in the pictures I've seen is you're bringing your antennas down below the building levels.
Not are you talking about towers or small cells? Because the towers, like the cell towers where we're talking about doing the monopole, I mean, those can be as high as the monopole can go structurally, and I've seen them up to like 180 feet tall. So
right.
They're not going to be small like that. The small cells are different. So I just want to clarify that, in case that's what you were thinking.
Okay.
So we were going to limit it to 50 feet.
So what is your 50-foot antenna? What do you need?
So the 50 foot, so that's the max height for a small cell, and that was set by the FCC.
Okay.
So I think the small cell is used more for 5G, is it not, versus
Yes, but I mean, they
regular cell?
But they put 5G on other towers, like, yes. Yeah, so But the larger towers, yes, we are, so the way it's written, to your point, I mean, we are saying, yeah, there's not gonna be any more 300-foot cell towers. So that is correct, by doing the monopole, that being the only type that you allow, that you are cutting out, but it's not 50 feet, it's like, 170.
But the frequency of the cell phone frequency is critical because a building will block the signal, a tree will block the signal. Basically, most of it's line of sight, because that's the high frequency. And so therefore, you need, if you want to get communications across your city, you're going to have to get some high antennas.
Well, what I've seen is, I mean, honestly, is that they'll come back with, they were gonna put one 300-foot tower, but instead, they're gonna put two, 160-foot towers, in two parts of the city. So, I mean, it is a trade-off. I mean, you are correct about that. And I guess, and maybe it's not as big a deal in Centerton. I don't know, I've just said through a lot of hearings about, the impact of the aesthetics of people's towers. And it seems like a way to resolve that problem. And quite honestly, I mean, it's a scale that to me, just like if you're just thinking about urban design and planning in general, there's no other 300-foot buildings or structures in Centerton, right? And so the scale can just get, it can cause, I think, more aesthetic impacts. I mean, if you want to consider that, I mean, I think you could do things like have those larger towers, but maybe, make the spacing from other, structures or whatever, much larger. But I mean, my experience with the wireless industry is they need towers where they need towers, right? And so honestly, the spacing stuff, if you start getting crazy with that, then that can cause more problems than just saying like, okay, just, you just top the tower and then they just figure out a way to do it. But your points are well taken, and I do think they're true, and it is 100% a trade-off. It's just you have to decide as a city what you want to do.
Could you suggested you make the type of tower or size of the tower compatible with the zoning of the land itself? So if you're in the A1 area where you've got hundreds of acre cows, you can put a big tower.
Yeah, but it's staying on 300 feet, you can see.
Yeah. But 100 acres away.
Right.
Oh, you can see 100
But you have, right, but you'd have to space that. I mean, so if you really didn't want to have that impact, then it'd be, like we were talking about, like we already put a space buffer on A1 to allow by right even for the monopole. Because you have a lot of A1 area that is directly adjacent to developed areas. So I think you would need to think about that spacing.
So I saw a bunch of mention of existing buildings, water towers, other structures. Is the height limited on that? Okay, so that's an option for them. Just personally, I'd rather have two smaller monopoles than one.
Yeah, I think the trade-off there is quantity. You're going to have more versus one big one.
I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer at all. I'm just telling you kind of what I've experienced and what kind of other cities have done. Like every city is different, maybe they're not a big deal here. Nobody doesn't care if their stuff's hooked up. I don't know.
I think aesthetics is becoming more and more of a, consideration for us, especially with what we went through. I just think about what we're going to do on the comprehensive plan and the land use plan and some other stuff. And there's a lot of work that went into, of course, where we want things, how we want things to look, and some others, and including, I know it's a controversial, but even trees along the streets or not, and some other. So I think it is important for us to consider it. I think, we certainly live in a beautiful part of the country, and we all agree with that. And I don't think any of us want a 300-foot pole that we would see. I agree with that. I don't understand all the trade-offs, but I think it would be we would probably be happier as a city, than having a large pole. I mean, I think that we need some regulations in place.
We're certainly not the first people to do this. If anything, I think we're holding time.
We're not going crazy like some other routes.
You could allow different tower types. I tried to talk to another city into doing this, but I thought it made sense for them, especially the way their city was laid out. They had some industrial areas that were up at a higher elevation. I was like, hey, it's already an industrial area. You know, if you want to put a self-support tower there, is it really going to mess with the aesthetics that much? I don't know. You know, like I do think there's some areas where it could be a trade-off, but I don't know about. Honestly, I don't know much about your industrial areas.
Few and far between.
We only have one, and it's been expired.
I think we have two.
Two.
You have two.
It used to be one.
Used to have.
So what's up about the airport?
There's another one on the west side.
Yeah.
We put a big tall tower out there in that one. I had a thought, like, you mentioned a lot of them, like new tower, like, we're a growing city, we're expanding, obviously we have our zones that we can do some things in now, but beyond kind of our planning area currently, like, what do you do with towers that come into your planning area that are 600 feet tall, that you have to deal with at a later date? Like, I'm sure we can't make them do something, but if it comes down, like, what can you do with that point, right?
So, I mean, basically all you can do at that point is if they're replacing or swapping out equipment, like I said, you can make sure that they're getting the loading right, so you're not gonna have structural issues. I mean, we did put a part in here about, you know, if the tower goes out of use or decommissioned, you know, they have to take it down in a certain period of time. So it was inside your city, it couldn't just sit there dormant forever.
So, and that, I had a couple questions on that. Who enforces the removal of the tower, and what sort of ramifications do you have to ensure that it gets taken down? Right?
I mean,
That's exactly all I need to hear.
I think so. First off, it depends on whether are they still in business.
Right.
But yeah, potentially.
I mean,
Yeah, there was that part,
Guys with
and
a
then
hacksaw.
another part about if it's no longer essentially in use, then nobody can track the private contracts to see what's in use. I mean, you can see if there's an antenna on it. But I think it's great to have in the code. I just don't know how you enforce it.
Yeah, and honestly, I've never been part of a tower decommissioning, because I don't think it's honestly something that people do. Because, you know, you can find a way to still make money off it.
Right.
You're not gonna take it down, or you're not gonna quit using it. And probably, you know, if you don't hang the same thing that you hung on it before, there's probably something different you could be hanging on it and getting money. Like, you could probably answer that better than I can.
Well, it's just the different type of antenna.
Right.
Well, there used to be one in
Really? Where?
Had a flag on it.
Where'd you say?
Steve's.
Oh, yeah.
He just had a single one, wasn't
It was a monochrome. Big flag on it.
I didn't figure they were in the business of taking it down.
Steve might have took it down.
Steve might have got the hacksaw out.
Steve might have took it down.
This may be more, I don't know, Jeremy knows this more than anybody, but you've got AT&T, you've got Verizon, like, AT&T says, I want to put a tower here, and Verizon comes back and says, well, I need a tower 50 feet to the right of that. Like, is there any sort of regulation that we can put on that?
So we did put something in there. I mean, so I've only seen that happen a few times. It does happen. When I worked at Washington County, we had there was obviously a dead spot, and there was one side of the line was City of Fayetteville, and one side was Washington County. And AT&T was pursuing a tower on the county side, and Fayetteville was pursuing it on, or Verizon was pursuing it on the other side. And there did actually end up being two towers that were under each other. That's the only time I saw that happen. And if both of us had things in our ordinances that would have prohibited that, if it was in the same jurisdiction, because they were in opposing jurisdictions, we did not have basically the ability to regulate that. And I don't even actually know if you could.
No, I don't think, I mean, you have standing to regulate what's happening, you know, across the border, so no.
So, if you have something that kind of combats that, like, you have to say, okay, this is why I want this tower, you know, kind of have to, we say, like, you have to prove that you've tried to co-locate on somebody and there's not anyone available. But, you know, I guess if somebody's building a tower at the exact same time, there might still not be someone available. So there are some safeguards in there to try to prevent that. Is it 100% like watertight? But I don't think we can get it.
It's like a dry county. Liquor store right there.
All named County Line Liquor.
County Line Liquor right there.
Any other questions or comments or even staff over
I like it as presented.
Yeah, I don't see anything.
We would like to request the council to set a public hearing for this on November 7th.
December 7th?
December 7th? Yes.
Yes.
For December 7th, and then for city council, you know, it recommend for December 14th.
Oh, I did have one question on the shot clock deal. So if they submit something that doesn't meet the code, is this another laughing?
Okay, so that was clear before the 2020 order. Yes, so if you, then like all these things, you have to document them in writing, right? So if they submit you something that's like missing something or doesn't meet the code, then yes, then staff can like answer back and say, this application is incomplete or does not comply with code or whatever, and then the shot clock starts over once, you know, if you follow those steps, right?
Okay.
You can also have a mutual tolling of the shot clock, if you agree mutually, which to me would be akin to like if something came before you and like the applicant requested to table it or something. I don't know. But there is a mutual thing. But I will say that they will see you. We got sued at Washington County because there's very specific way, like was denied. The planning commission denied something through a conditional use permit process, and you had to give them a written, like if you do deny something, you have to give them a written denial, which we did. But actually, the letter of the law says you have to tell them why it was denied, which to me, I was like, well, they were there, so they know as well as I do, you know, because like there were no minutes or anything, so I'm like, what am I supposed to, you know, speculate?
We got top.
Well, so I will say.
So they loopholed it?
They loopholed.
They did.
They loopholed.
They had to go to federal court, huh?
Did they build it?
They did not build it. Actually, I don't.
Steve's out there now.
All the ins and outs. Somehow, like the federal court had pity on us and basically like gave us the chance to kind of remedy it. I really appreciated it, but I mean, technically, I don't know what we deserved it, but anyway, whatever. But you know, it was very stressful.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah.
So.
No, I've actually just got a question, because I know you've gone through this, and I know this is an area of law that is rapidly changing.
Yeah.
And I know this whole new administration's package of infrastructure and whatnot, are we going to anticipate a completely new set of rules?
She laughed at you too. So.
She said she was trying to clarify the clarity of the reclarification.
That's a good question, and I don't know. Because I know that there are like broadband provisions in there, but I don't know that, you know, I don't know that they cover anything that's specific to small cells, because the broadband is a little bit different. But I don't know, honestly. I'm still trying to figure out what they did in 2020. You know?
Exactly.
So I'm not sure,
Okay.
but that's a good thing. Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Nope.
the hard work.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of work.
And we'll get it cleaned up. Sorry, there's still
November 2nd.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
You better get to work.
Yeah, we better get busy.
Tentative.
Yeah, well, I'll be as
You're here.
tentative as I can be.
You have less time than Julian.
Well, I can be super. So, you know, I had met with some of the folks at X&A, in fact, when I saw Alex, he was like, thank goodness, because aviation easements are, I mean, that's, I would imagine with your aviation experience, you may know more than I do. It is a niche. The one thing I will say is I think it is important for the city to attempt to get ahead of this, because I mean, I think the potential for litigation is out there. I know it's very controversial with city staff and public, but I think it's something, regardless of what we want to do, we want home buyers to know what they're getting into and understand that they're in a flight plan. So this has been provided to me by some of the folks at X&A. When I saw Alex, I pulled her aside and said, hey, you want to talk about this? Because you know so much more. She's like, no. But I've got the guy that would be happy to come in and do so at another meeting if we want to get him in. Rick.
So even Bentonville gets complaints weekly.
Right.
And so.
And that's my fear. I think ultimately, you know, what I truly think is we probably prescriptively adversely have easements, but I think it would potentially avoid us litigation, having to defend that, if we're able to get ahead of it and reduce it.
The one thing I took from that meeting we had, and it seemed like a very large bit of self-interest on their part, was their funding for the expansion of additional runways, and really honing in on the regulations outside of that. I agree that we need to do the best to protect our citizens, but I would also like to compare that to maybe what other examples are, to find something that actually works, that we think is workable.
And I know there was talk, and I don't know if staff looked at similar municipalities, you know, with growth. I think we're talking about like Joplin and Fort Smith and other areas like that, to see exactly how they handle it, to see if we can kind of take
we're learning
what they're doing.
Obviously, it's the same airport. Bentonville has the regulations in there. I'm sure you've looked at them. I haven't, but that just struck me as a little odd when they were bringing everything up and kind of mentioned.
My understanding from what they said, and maybe it was interpreted differently, was that they're mandated to at least attempt to provide notice, or they don't get funding.
Okay.
That was my understanding. Other than that, I think they're dotting the I, crossing the T. So at some point when they get sued, they can say, "Listen, you know what? We've done whatever." You can talk to the folks over at the city of Centerton, who we gave them notice. We told them the potential pitfalls, and they chose to do nothing.
That's also my understanding from my research and talking with them.
Okay. It just struck me as a little weird.
I did want to also
She's
let
here
you
saying
know
on
that
record.
since that was put on the agenda to look at this, the mayor received an invitation to X&A, and I'll be attending with him and possibly Todd. Brian's not available, but they want to do a regional discussion between the cities and X&A on compatible land uses, zoning, future land use plans. But it's not just us that's having to deal with this, there's other cities. So they are, Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning Commission is getting this together and has invited the cities and X&A together. So we'll hopefully come back with some more information, and also, like Brian said, have out there for someone from the airport, to discuss.
You can send that to me, if you don't mind.
Hey Brian, what you've prepared here on this easement document.
Well, I have not prepared this. I have forwarded it from what they have prepared.
Excuse me. What you presented.
He logged it up real quick.
I know.
Whoa. I didn't do it.
So this easement that you have included for us to review.
Sure.
you know, obviously this looks like it'd be filed by a separate document and then listed on the plat. I think it's really important to have it on the plat, because a separate document, nobody's gonna know what it says. So I didn't know if that was the intent and how other people handle it, or if you've even gotten that far.
Well, and that's where, as far as getting it set up, and I think part of the problem is we're a little bit behind the curve on this, because we've got development, and we've gotten it ahead of us. So as far as institute, that's, we're gonna have to figure that one out.
My second question would be, if this code were enacted, would this not essentially be retroactive, but it's a preliminary plat that some of these subdivisions would be submitting out there in that area? This is really on a final plat, so would that be applicable to those developments that are coming up, or is the kickover point when they submit the prelim?
I don't think that we can start making requirements on things that are already in the process.
Right, but they haven't submitted the final plat, and the final plat dedicates the easements. So technically, it's one piece of land, their land. They build the infrastructure to be able to split the property with the final plat.
Right, and that's what I think. That's what I do think it should be put on, if I understand. Just like we're requiring. I think it's like requiring any other type of improvement or whatnot.
Sure.
That it is just a condition of development. Now, I've never done one of these, so I mean that's where I'd love to get Rick involved, and he might be able to explain the process.
Because I think outside of those two,
right.
three, we get away from this.
Yeah, those are the ones that are affected by this.
Just the strip of park
There's
right
a
there.
lot of houses that are gonna go
right
there.
I mean, my point would be is I don't think this necessarily takes away from any of their buildable area. This is all really kind of in the sky.
Well, but I think some of the complaints are, I mean, that it is a taking, and
I see.
But like I said, it's my position that taking is already happened. We're just reducing it to writing, but there's a lot of pushback on that. So that's.
Okay, well, I'll leave that up to you, but that was my question.
But it has been noted, I think, on every discussion of those, I mean, it's in.
But it has not been noted to the
buyer.
The buyer, the folks that are moving from Texas or California, they're buying sight unseen.
And that's where Jeff's coming from, is you're gonna have the first person's gonna call in, and why is your plane 5 feet over my house? You know,
although we're a city as a whole, and this won't help us, we had the one that we didn't deny, that got overturned. That's not gonna help us in a lawsuit, I don't imagine, but, we've tried to do our best here.
But I think part of that, I believe Todd stated that some of the reason for that being overturned, because that was not been adopted to our code. Right? We were using someone else's law to make a decision, and so
we can't enforce it.
That's why I asked, like, when we need to get them on the agenda to get them ahead.
Next planning commission meeting is 11/16. Let us know if you will not be here. There's a council meeting on 11/8. There's a tech review meeting on 12/2. I'm assuming y'all moved in person because you took it off the.
No, I forgot to add it on there. Still Zoom.
They're virtual. And anything else from staff?
Tech reviews are virtual?
Yes. Tech reviews have been. I just
it was not
neglected to slap that little fancy word on there.
It's John, motion to adjourn.
Yeah, second. Third. Go Brave.
3-0 in the third, let's go.
No, don't hush on this.